The Fall of the Gods. Long ago, the gods ruled the world with immense power, shaping lands, seas, and skies according to their will. Their rule was absolute, and mortals lived in their shadows, worshipping them as creators of all life. However, this peace was not meant to last. Among the gods, Thanar, once revered as the deity of creation and balance, began to grow resentful of the other gods' influence. His desire for absolute power led him to question the divine order. The gods, united by their ancient pact, were forbidden from seeking more power than they already had. But Thanar, consumed by ambition, secretly conspired to overthrow them. Thanar's rebellion was swift and brutal. He used forbidden magic to summon creatures from the abyss, spreading chaos across the heavens. In a final act of defiance, he shattered the celestial realm, causing the gods to fall one by one. Their power was broken, and their divine essence scattered, leaving only echoes of their former glory. But Thanar's victory came at a great cost. By destroying the Pantheon, he inadvertently unleashed dark forces that would corrupt not just the heavens, but the very earth itself. These forces spread like wildfire, sowing destruction and turning the world into a land of shadows and torment. The gods were no more, and in their place, creatures of darkness and corruption took hold of the world, enslaving humanity and casting it into eternal night. The mortals, now left without their divine protectors, had to adapt, and though many fell into despair, a few began to rise, seeking answers and hoping to restore balance. But the world would never be the same again. The fall of the gods marked an era where darkness ruled, and the whispers of an ancient prophecy grew louder, a prophecy that spoke of a chosen one who would rise from the ashes to confront the very forces Thanar had unleashed.
The Iron Kingdom. After the fall of the gods, the world was plunged into chaos. The dark forces unleashed by Thanar spread across the land, corrupting everything they touched. Kingdoms fell, and the once vibrant world was overtaken by shadows. Cities crumbled, and the skies grew dark, as if the very essence of life had been drained away. In the midst of this destruction, one city remained standing, the Iron Kingdom. Built from the remnants of ancient divine fortresses, the Iron Kingdom was ruled by the descendants of the fallen gods. They were not gods themselves, but powerful beings who claimed the mantle of divine rule, claiming their right to control the land as heirs of Thanar's reign. The Iron Kingdom was a fortress of steel and shadow, its walls towering high and its gates tightly sealed. The city's rulers, known as the Immortal Lords, were descendants of Thanar's closest allies, immortal beings who had inherited their ancestors' powers. They used their abilities to keep the world in a state of fear, ensuring that none would rise against them. The people of the Iron Kingdom lived under constant oppression. Those who resisted the Immortal Lords were swiftly crushed, their names erased from history. The citizens had no choice but to serve their overlords, for any act of defiance meant certain death. In the streets, whispers of a prophecy began to circulate, a prophecy of a hero who would rise to challenge the darkness and restore balance to the world. But the immortal lords were not unaware of the growing rumors. They knew that the prophecy foretold the return of a force that could undo their rule. As a result, they became increasingly paranoid, hunting down anyone who might possess knowledge of the prophecy and silencing them before they could act. The kingdom's might seemed unshakable, but beneath the ironclad surface, a rebellion was beginning to take form. Small groups of rebels, inspired by the whispers of the prophecy, began to organize in secret, hoping to find the chosen one who could bring an end to the reign of the immortal lords and free the world from their dark rule.
The Last Guardians. In the shadows of the Iron Kingdom, a secret order known as the Last Guardians began to take shape. Formed from the remnants of ancient warrior clans that had once fought alongside the gods, the Guardians were dedicated to protecting the world's remaining balance and seeking out the artifacts of power that could restore the gods and their divine order. Their purpose was to find the hidden relics of the deities and preserve them from falling into the hands of the immortal lords or the forces of darkness. The Last Guardians were led by a mysterious figure, Elandra, who was said to be the last living member of the ancient Order of the Light, a group of paladins once sworn to protect the celestial realm. Under her leadership, the Guardians became skilled in the ways of the old magic, learning to harness the remnants of divine power that remained after the fall. The Order's base of operations was hidden deep in the mountains, where they trained in secret, away from the watchful eyes of the immortal lords. Unlike the people of the Iron Kingdom, who had been subjugated by fear, the Guardians held on to the belief that the gods could one day return, and with their return, the world could be restored. Their hope was that the Chosen One, foretold by the ancient prophecy, would rise from among the mortals and wield the power of the lost gods to restore peace and balance to the world. But despite their efforts, the Last Guardians were few in number, and their secrecy meant that most of the world had forgotten about them. The people had grown accustomed to living under the rule of the immortal lords, with many too frightened to believe in the possibility of a savior. Some whispered that the gods' power had faded forever, leaving only the ruins of a broken world. Still, the Guardians pressed on, gathering knowledge, seeking out hidden temples, and recovering ancient texts that could help them decipher the true nature of the prophecy. They knew that the Chosen One could not be far, and they hoped that when the time came, they would be ready to stand beside him, to guide him toward fulfilling his destiny. The Last Guardians were not only protectors of the divine artifacts, but also keepers of hope, the last light in a world overtaken by darkness.
The Lost Prophecy. Deep within the hidden archives of the Last Guardians, a single scroll remained untouched for centuries. This scroll, known as the Lost Prophecy, was said to have been written by the gods themselves before their fall, foretelling the return of a chosen one who would restore the balance between light and darkness. It had been hidden away to prevent the immortal lords from discovering its existence, for it was the key to breaking their reign. The prophecy was cryptic, filled with riddles and symbols only decipherable to those who understood the ancient divine language. It spoke of a mortal born under the blood moon, one who would wield the power of the gods without ever fully understanding it. The scroll also hinted that the Chosen One's path would be paved with immense trials, and that only through sacrifice would the world be saved. Elandra, the leader of the Last Guardians, had spent years trying to decode the full meaning of the prophecy. She knew that the prophecy wasn't merely a story or a legend. It was a warning, a blueprint for the coming of the Savior. But the Guardians were unsure of when or where the Chosen One would appear. The signs were subtle, and the prophecy was not clear on what would trigger the beginning of this great destiny. The scroll also mentioned a series of powerful relics, the divine artifacts, scattered across the world, hidden in the most dangerous places. These artifacts held immense power, enough to challenge the immortal lords themselves. It was believed that the Chosen One would need to find and wield these relics to face Thanar's lingering influence. However, there was a fear that the immortal lords had also uncovered fragments of the prophecy, or worse, they had their own prophecy foretelling the coming of the same hero. The race to find the Chosen One was not only a matter of hope, it was a desperate struggle for survival. The Chosen One. Aeron, a young man born in the slums of the Iron Kingdom, had no idea of his true heritage. Raised as an orphan, he spent his days stealing from the rich to survive, unaware that the blood of ancient gods flowed through his veins. He had always felt a strange sense of purpose, a feeling that he was destined for something greater, but he had no clue what that was. His life had been one of struggle and hardship, always fighting for his next meal, always avoiding the eyes of the immortal lord's enforcers. One fateful evening, as he attempted to steal from a merchant in the marketplace, he encountered a mysterious figure, a member of the last Guardians. This figure, a woman named Lyra, had been sent to find the Chosen One, and she recognized something in Aeron the moment she saw him. She saw the faint traces of divine power that he had unknowingly inherited. Lyra took Aeron under her wing, training him in secret, teaching him the ancient ways of the Guardians. At first, Aeron resisted, unable to believe that he could have any connection to the gods. But as his training continued, strange things began to happen. He was able to perform feats of strength and agility beyond the abilities of any normal human. He could manipulate the elements with nothing but his will, and his dreams were filled with visions of a time long past, of gods walking the earth. It wasn't long before Aeron began to believe in the possibility that he was indeed the one foretold in the prophecy. But this belief came with a heavy burden. His powers were not fully understood, and the more he tapped into them, the more dangerous they became. He feared losing control, afraid of becoming just another weapon in a world already consumed by darkness. Lyra told him that the time had come. The Chosen One had to rise, and Aeron was the key. Together, they would need to journey across the land to find the divine artifacts, but they would not be alone. The immortal lords were already aware of the prophecy and would stop at nothing to prevent the Chosen One from fulfilling his destiny. It was now a race against time, and Aeron would have to decide if he was ready to face his true destiny and the darkness that came with it.
The journey begins. With Lyra's guidance, Aeron began his training in earnest. Though he had always been resourceful, the idea that he was the Chosen One, the key to restoring balance, weighed heavily on his shoulders. He had never asked for this destiny. But as his powers grew, so did his understanding that there was no turning back. His fate was sealed the moment Lyra had found him. Their first task was to seek out the first of the divine artifacts, the Sword of Dawn. Legends spoke of its power to cut through darkness and purify the land, but it was hidden in the cursed Whispering Forest, a place where even the bravest adventurers dared not enter. The forest was alive with ancient, vengeful spirits, and those who ventured too deep rarely returned. Before setting out, Lyra told Aeron the importance of the sword. It was believed to be a gift from the gods themselves, created to protect the world from forces like Thanar. But the sword's power came with a price. It was said that only one who had mastered the light within could wield it without succumbing to its devastating consequences.
As they ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew colder, and an unnatural silence enveloped them. Aeron could feel the weight of countless eyes watching them from the shadows. The spirits of the forest whispered secrets, trying to lure them off course, but Lyra kept them focused, guiding Aeron with the strength of her experience. They encountered creatures twisted by the forest's curse, beasts with eyes like burning coals and fangs that dripped poison. But Aeron's powers allowed him to hold his ground, summoning the winds to knock the beasts back and manipulating the earth to trap them. Despite his growing strength, he felt an unfamiliar darkness stirring within him every time he used his powers, a sensation he couldn't shake. When they finally reached the heart of the forest, they found the Sword of Dawn lying in a stone altar, bathed in soft light. The moment Aeron touched the hilt, a rush of power coursed through him, and the sword hummed with energy. But as the power surged, so did a wave of memories, visions of gods falling, of the world being consumed by darkness. It was too much for Aeron to handle, and he staggered back, his mind racing with visions of the past. Lyra quickly rushed to his side. "You're not ready for this yet," she said, holding his trembling hand. "The sword is powerful, but it's also a mirror of your soul. If you're not careful, it will consume you." Aeron knew the truth in her words. He had to control the power, not let the power control him. But that would mean confronting the shadows within himself, something far more terrifying than any enemy.
The shadow of the past. After claiming the Sword of Dawn, Aeron and Lyra began their journey to find the next artifact, but their path was interrupted by memories that haunted Aeron. In the quiet moments of their travels, he would dream of another time, a time before the fall of the gods. He saw visions of his parents, faces he had never known. They appeared to him as bright figures, godlike in their beauty, standing beside powerful beings. Then a shift occurred. Their smiles faded, and their eyes were filled with sorrow. One night, as they camped near a quiet river, Aeron confided in Lyra about these dreams. He described how the faces of the gods, particularly Thanar, seemed to haunt him in his visions. "I don't understand. Why do these dreams keep coming to me?" he asked, his voice filled with unease. Lyra looked at him, her expression softening. "Aeron, the power within you is tied to the gods, and the dreams are their way of reaching out to you. Your bloodline is one of the lost, but it is also a gift and a curse. Your parents, they were part of the gods' inner circle, but when Thanar rebelled, they were among those who tried to stop him." Aeron's eyes widened. "You mean my parents weren't just ordinary people?" "No," Lyra said, her voice steady. "Your parents were deities, part of the divine order before the fall, but they chose to fight Thanar. They believed in the prophecy and in the hope that one day someone would rise to undo the damage caused by Thanar's rebellion. They sacrificed everything for that cause, and in the end, they vanished. No one knew where they went or what became of them, but I believe they knew you would come one day." The weight of this revelation hit Aeron like a crushing wave. His parents were not only powerful beings, but had sacrificed everything to protect the world. His bloodline carried the weight of their actions, and now the burden of that legacy rested on his shoulders. Suddenly, the shadows within him grew louder. His connection to the past became undeniable, and the anger and sorrow he felt began to surface. Thanar's image filled his mind. The rebellion, the destruction, the fall of the gods. He felt a deep, unshakable connection to it all. Aeron knew that to defeat Thanar and save the world, he would have to confront not only the dark forces outside, but also the darkness within himself. But the question remained, would he be able to control the power of the gods that flowed through his veins,
or would he fall victim to the same shadow that had consumed them all?
The betrayal. As Aeron and Lyra ventured further into the heart of their journey, they encountered many trials. With the sword of dawn in his possession, Aeron felt the power of the gods growing within him, but so did the darkness. His control over his abilities wavered, especially when faced with difficult choices. He knew that every decision brought him closer to his destiny, yet also closer to losing himself. Despite the growing tension and the battles they faced, a new sense of camaraderie had formed between Aeron and Lyra. They had become more than just mentor and pupil. They had become allies and friends, united by the common goal of restoring the world. But the trust they had built would soon be shattered. One fateful evening, as they made their way toward the Cavern of Eternal Shadows, where the second divine artifact, the Crown of Souls, was rumored to be hidden, Lyra suddenly grew distant. Her eyes clouded with a shadow that Aeron had never seen before. The bond they had shared seemed to fracture. In the dead of night, Aeron woke to find Lyra gone. Panic gripped his heart as he searched for camp, but she was nowhere to be found. Only a note was left behind. It was brief, a single line written in a familiar hand. The prophecy must be fulfilled, but not by you. Confusion and betrayal flooded Aeron's mind. Had Lyra, his trusted ally, turned against him? Or was she coerced by someone? He searched for hours, but there was no sign of her. The path to the Crown of Souls was now in question, and Aeron's doubts began to consume him. Had he been led into this journey only to be betrayed by someone he had trusted? Unknown to Aeron, Lyra had been working under a hidden agenda all along. She had been a guardian of the prophecy, yes, but her true allegiance had been to a higher purpose, one that would not allow the Chosen One to be the one who would break the cycle. The dark forces had already claimed her heart, and she had made the ultimate sacrifice to ensure the prophecy's true course. Devastated by the betrayal, Aeron pressed on, now even more determined to fulfill the prophecy despite the loss of his most trusted ally. He could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders. He had already lost so much, and now the final artifact, the Crown of Souls, was within his grasp. As he entered the Cavern of Eternal Shadows, a foreboding silence gripped him. The walls were lined with ancient runes that seemed to pulse with an eerie, malevolent energy. Aeron knew that this was no ordinary temple. It was the heart of darkness, the very source of the corruption that Thanar had once unleashed. Here, the final test awaited him, the test that would decide the fate of the world. As he reached the inner chamber, he found the Crown of Souls resting on a pedestal, bathed in an unnatural light. But standing before it was a familiar figure, Lyra. She was no longer the mentor he had once trusted. She had been transformed, her eyes glowing with an otherworldly darkness. "Aeron," she whispered, her voice chilling, "you were never meant to wield this power. The prophecy has been twisted, corrupted. I had to stop you." In that moment, the truth became clear. Lyra had been a pawn in a much larger game, one played by the immortal lords and the forces of darkness. She had been chosen to prevent the Chosen One from fulfilling his destiny, to keep the world in its eternal shadow. Aeron, now fully aware of the depth of the betrayal, felt his power surge. His connection to the gods grew stronger as he reached for the sword at his side. The sword of dawn hummed with energy, resonating with every emotion. "You don't have to do this, Lyra," Aeron said, his voice steady but filled with pain. "You were once a protector. You can still help me."
But Lyra shook her head, the darkness in her eyes deepening. "I was never meant to be your protector, Aeron. The world must remain in shadow for a reason. We cannot escape our fate." With a single sorrowful glance, the two locked eyes, and Aeron knew what had to be done. The final battle had begun. He raised the Sword of Dawn, summoning the full force of its power, and charged at Lyra. The clash of their weapons echoed through the cavern, a battle between light and dark, between destiny and free will. The fight was fierce, with Lyra's dark powers pushing Aeron to his limits, but he refused to succumb. Every strike of his sword was filled with the memories of his parents, of the gods who had fallen, and of the world that awaited salvation. In the end, Aeron's will proved stronger. With a final blow, he struck down the corrupted version of Lyra. Her body collapsed, but as she fell, she whispered, "You are the last hope and the world's greatest sacrifice." With the crown of souls in his possession, Aeron felt the weight of his journey, of the sacrifices made, and the cost of the power he now held. But he knew the final battle was still ahead, confronting Thanar, the dark god who had once torn the world apart.
The legacy of the gods. With the crown of souls in his possession and Lyra's tragic fall weighing heavily on his heart, Aeron knew the final battle was at hand. The power within him, born from the gods' bloodline, had grown unstoppable, but it was not without its cost. The journey had taken everything from him: his trust, his mentor, his innocence. Yet, despite the betrayals and losses, he was the only one left who could stop Thanar, the dark god who had once shattered the heavens. Aeron's mind was a storm of conflicting emotions as he stood at the foot of the Gate of Eternal Night, a massive structure that led into Thanar's domain. The dark god had waited for this moment, knowing that the prophecy would eventually bring the Chosen One to his doorstep. Thanar had always been prepared, but now it was time to end the cycle. The Gate of Eternal Night was a vast and imposing entrance to the underworld, where Thanar had made his lair. The air was thick with shadow, and the ground beneath Aeron's feet seemed to pulse with dark energy. He could feel the weight of every soul that had been lost to Thanar's corruption, every death, every tragedy. They were all part of the same story, the same endless war between light and darkness. With the crown of souls placed upon his head, Aeron felt a surge of divine energy course through him, filling him with the knowledge and strength of the gods. The crown, once a tool of dark magic, now became a symbol of hope, transforming into a beacon of light that shattered the surrounding darkness. He was no longer just Aeron, the orphan of the Iron Kingdom. He was a god reborn, a bridge between the mortal world and the divine. He had inherited not only the power of the gods, but their legacy. His purpose was clear: to defeat Thanar, to destroy the shadow that had tainted the world, and to restore balance. As he entered the realm of Thanar, he was met with an eerie silence. The dark god's power filled the air, thick and suffocating. Thanar stood at the center of his throne room, an imposing figure of darkness and rage. His once beautiful form now twisted by centuries of malice. "Aeron," Thanar's voice boomed, a mixture of mocking amusement and ancient fury. "You've come. I knew you would. But do you truly believe you can defeat me? You are just a mortal, just a child of gods who have fallen. You have no idea what you're truly facing." Aeron raised the Sword of Dawn high, its light radiating through the room, cutting through the darkness like a beacon. "I am not just a child of gods," Aeron replied, his voice unwavering. "I am the end of your reign, Thanar, and I will restore this world no matter the cost." The final battle between Aeron and Thanar was unlike any the world had ever seen. It was a clash of ancient powers, a struggle between creation and destruction, light and darkness. Thanar unleashed his full fury,
conjuring storms of darkness, twisting the very fabric of reality. But Aeron, with the power of the gods and the weight of his journey behind him, fought with everything he had. With each strike of the Sword of Dawn, the darkness around him began to recede. Thanar's power faltered, his form weakening as Aeron drew closer to his ultimate goal. The fight was brutal, but Aeron's resolve never wavered. He had come too far to fail now. At last, with a final devastating blow, Aeron pierced Thanar's heart. The dark god let out a deafening scream as his form shattered into 1,000 pieces, his power dissipating into the air. The once impenetrable darkness lifted, and the world began to heal. The sky cleared, the earth trembled, and the souls lost to Thanar's corruption were freed. Aeron stood amidst the ruins of the battle, breathless and battered. The world had been saved, but at a great cost. The power of the gods had been restored, but it came with a price. Aeron had used it to end Thanar's reign, but now he would have to leave the world to heal on its own. As the last remnants of darkness faded, Aeron looked around at the world he had saved. It was a broken world, but it was a world with hope. He had completed the prophecy, but the legacy of the gods was not his alone to carry. It was the world's to shape, to rebuild. Aeron, the last of the gods' children, had fulfilled his destiny. The gods were gone, but their legacy lived on in the hearts of mortals. The world would rise again, stronger than ever, and the balance between light and darkness would remain in the hands of those who chose to protect it. With one last glance at the world he had saved, Aeron turned and walked into the horizon, leaving behind the legacy of the gods. The journey was over, but the story of the Chosen One would live on in the hearts of all who remembered him.